Today, we're ranking K-drama romance male leads from best to worst, based on how they actually treat the female lead, and whether they raised our standards or seriously tested our patience. Quick breakdown. We're starting from the bottom, because if the red flags are loud, we're not pretending they don't exist. At the very bottom is Tier 5. Respectfully, no. These are the male leads where the red flags repeat, communication stays bad, and loving them feels more exhausting than rewarding. Moving up, we hit Tier 4. He's cute, I guess. The attraction is there, the charm is working, but the effort, consistency, and emotional depth never quite catch up. Next is Tier 3. Fun, but I'm not changing my standards. He's enjoyable. I like him, but I kept waiting for growth that never fully arrived. Then we get to Tier 2. Not perfect, but worth it. These men have flaws, but they learn, take accountability, and show real effort when it matters. And finally, at the top, is where the bar stays met without reminders. Tier 1. This is my husband, Your Honor. Emotionally mature, communicative, and dependable. He shows up every day and makes love feel safe, calm, and intentional. So, are you ready? Let's go. First up, Gwan from King the Land, played by Lee Jun-ho.
네, 갖고 오셨어요?
안녕하십니까, 본부장님.
내가 노리고 접근했어요. 꼬리도 내가 먼저 쳤고요. 물론 꼬리가 있다면 말이죠.
Gwan is one of the rare chaebol male leads who actually rewrote the archetype instead of just polishing it. Plot-wise, King the Land follows Gwan, the heir to a luxury hotel conglomerate who despises fake smiles, as he crosses paths with Cheon-sarang, a hotel employee whose job literally requires her to smile through everything. One of the biggest things working in his favor is that he doesn't stall the romance. Once he realizes he has feelings for Sarang, he doesn't hide behind denial or emotional distance for half the drama. He acknowledges it and moves forward, which already puts him ahead of a lot of male leads. What really works for me is his consistency. Even when Sarang is hesitant, he doesn't disappear or pull back. He stays present, patient, and intentional. The dates are thoughtful, planned, and fully committed. Not low effort, not last minute, and definitely not performative. Where he really earns points is how he treats the people in Sarang's life. He shows genuine care for her grandmother without needing to be prompted, checks in on her before work, and stays present when things escalate into a hospital situation. He treats her like family, not a side character. That same respect extends to Sarang's friends. Instead of acting threatened or dismissive, he listens, takes their complaints seriously, and actually makes things right, without turning it into a CEO flex. All of this happens while he's dealing with a messy family and inheritance situation, yet he never uses that as an excuse to emotionally withdraw. He keeps choosing Sarang and building something real with her. That said, he's not flawless. There are moments where his status clashes with her work life, and his jealousy does surface at times. It's sometimes framed as cute, but it's still there, and I'm not ignoring it. Because of that, he's not an automatic Tier 1 for me. But when you look at his consistency, his effort, and how fully he integrates into her life, the ranking feels clear. Gwan earns Tier 2. Not perfect, but worth it. Let's continue. Next up, Choi Seung-hyo from Love Next Door, played by Jung Hae-in, opposite Jung So-min as Bae Seok-ryu.
너 어떻게 나한테 이래? 성녀야, 너 얼마나 더 미루려고 했어? 언제까지 숨기려고 했어?
성효야.
The appeal is instant, but if I'm being honest, the looks are doing most of the heavy lifting. From the start, the drama makes it clear why their tension exists. Seok-ryu returns to Korea trying to quietly reset her life while hiding what really happened in the US, and Seung-hyo is the childhood friend turned perfect on paper architect. Their dynamic is built on years of unresolved feelings layered over years of emotional avoidance. The chemistry is obvious, but it constantly feels like he's circling his emotions instead of actually saying what he means. As the story goes on, his communication issues become harder to ignore. When emotions spike, he reacts first and explains later, if at all. There are moments where Seok-ryu has to directly ask him what his outburst even meant, which immediately shifts the emotional labor onto her instead of offering reassurance. Even after romantic feelings surface, he struggles to give her space cleanly. After confessing, he turns her request for time into a literal countdown using a milk expiration date. It's framed as cute, but it quietly adds pressure at a moment when her life is already overwhelming. The intention might be sweet, but the execution centers his need for certainty. Jealousy also shows up in ways that feel messy rather than mature. When her ex-fiancé re-enters the picture, Seung-hyo's insecurity starts driving his behavior. Instead of grounding the situation with trust, he lets tension and snappy comments take over. And at times, he feels more reactive than reassuring. Where this really drops him for me is during Seok-ryu's health crisis. When she collapses and is rushed to the ER, it's revealed that she previously had stage 2 stomach cancer and underwent major surgery and chemotherapy in the US. This is the exact moment where he could have become her safe person. He offers to take her to the hospital, but when she chooses her ex instead, he pulls back and doesn't even go right away, only showing up after she's discharged. If the person you love is hospitalized, not following at all is honestly wild. He also finds out about her illness in the worst way possible, by accidentally discovering a hospital report in her bag. She doesn't tell him herself, which says a lot about the emotional space he hasn't managed to create yet. That's ultimately why he doesn't rise higher for me. Seung-hyo cares, the feelings are real, and the chemistry works. But when things get hard, he's still too closed off, pride-driven, and reactive. That's why Choi Seung-hyo lands in Tier 4. He's cute, I guess. Let's talk about one where the ranking isn't a surprise. Some people will call him complex or realistic, and sure. But be honest, you would not want to date this man in real life. Next up, Park Jae-eon from Nevertheless, played by Song Kang, opposite Han So-hee as Yu Nabi.
지금까지 괜찮은 거 아니었어? 왜 갑자기?
그래. 여태까지 내가 되도 않게 쿨한 척해서 미안.
Nevertheless is built entirely on attraction without clarity. Nabi wants romance but doesn't fully trust love, and Jae-eon enters her life as pure temptation. Butterflies, late-night flirting, intense chemistry, with zero intention of commitment. Even Netflix labels it a friends with benefits situation, which is already the warning sign. And yes, we were hopeful anyway. From the start, he sets the pattern, he gets close fast, acts like something real is about to happen, then keeps everything undefined. He's bold with attraction and extremely careful when it comes to responsibility. The iconic "Do you want to see butterflies?" moment says it all. Romantic, memorable, and completely non-committal. Nabi eventually realizes the truth. He doesn't actually want to date her, but he doesn't stop pulling her in. He keeps benefiting from closeness without ever naming the relationship. It gets worse when other women are clearly still in the picture. He keeps doors open, moves between lanes, and calls it honesty. As viewers, we're wired to root for male leads, but with him, it feels pointless. At that point, I'd rather just admire Song Kang and stop expecting growth. Publicly, he does boyfriend-coded things. Privately, nothing is defined. So Nabi carries all the emotional labor while he enjoys intimacy without risk. The gray zone drags on so long, it stops feeling like a slow burn and starts feeling like emotional limbo. Even by the end, the growth is shaky. When she finally asks if he wants to date, he answers with more push-pull instead of accountability. She admits she hates him and still stays. Seriously, this is more stressful than watching Train to Busan or Sweet Home. So yes, he's fascinating and extremely watchable, but Park Jae-eon is Tier 5. Respectfully? No. And listen, if you do want this kind of man in real life, at least make sure he looks like Song Kang. Let's continue. Next up, Jang Shin-yu from Destined With You, played by Rowoon.
질투하는 거야?
질투하는 게 아니라 짜증난 거예요. 장신 씨 뭐예요? 나한테 기다리라고 했잖아요.
당신도 기다리겠다고 해놓고 건재경차 타고 같이 출근했잖아.
네, 같이 출근했어요.
Shin-yu is the kind of male lead who's incredibly charming, highly watchable, and consistently entertaining, but never quite solid enough to raise my standards. At first glance, he looks like he has everything together. He's an ace lawyer, confident, admired, and fully aware of his own appeal. The complication, of course, is the generational family curse, the bloody hand situation that's actively ruining his health. When he crosses paths with Hong-jo, a civil servant who ends up with an old wooden chest and a forbidden spellbook tied to that curse, the romance immediately leans into fate, magic, and destiny doing a lot of the work. To his credit, Shin-yu does show up. He keeps orbiting Hongjo instead of disappearing, even when he's clearly a mess himself. Early on, he makes sure she gets home safely when she's drunk or upset, and that consistency alone keeps him far from the lower tiers. He also eventually admits he's in love with her, which matters, especially since he spends a lot of time hiding behind teasing and deflection. He's also actively trying to break the curse. The entire premise revolves around him desperately looking for a way out, and slowly realizing that Hongjo is deeply tied to the solution. That effort gives the relationship real stakes beyond surface-level attraction. Where things start to fall apart is how long the girlfriend/fiancé situation lingers. Nayeon isn't some vague past relationship that's already over. She's actively in his life, the relationship has real weight, and there's even a proposal moment in the mix. While Hongjo is clearly becoming the emotional center of his day-to-day life, Shin-yu is still technically tied to someone else, and the show lets that ambiguity sit there far too long. That's where his boundaries stay frustratingly blurry. It's not that he's confused for one episode, he operates in a gray zone where he emotionally behaves like Hongjo matters most, but structurally hasn't cleaned up his situation. And when a man is emotionally orbiting another woman while keeping a girlfriend or fiancé-shaped placeholder, that's not romance. That's stress. It also puts Hongjo in an unfair position. Even with the curse and fate angle explaining his pull toward her, she's left questioning herself instead of feeling chosen. I really dislike when a female lead has to emotionally babysit a man's unfinished business. The heavy reliance on fate and curse logic doesn't help either. Sometimes it feels like the story is excusing his indecision with "destiny made him do it." But if you're acting like a boyfriend to one woman while still being someone else's boyfriend on paper, a magic spell doesn't make that romantic. So yes, Shin-yu is charming, dramatic, and extremely watchable. I like him, I enjoy him, I completely get the appeal, but he stays confusing longer than necessary. That's why Jang Shin-yu lands in Tier 3. Fun, but I'm not changing my standards. Lastly, and I already know most of you will agree with me on this, young Gwan-sik from When Life Gives You Tangerines, played by Park Bo-gum and later by Park Hae-joon. And honestly, this man might have permanently ruined my standards. The drama follows a multi-decade Jeju to Seoul life romance. Hae-sun, born in 1951, is a poor Jeju girl chasing a poet's dream, while Gwan-sik, born in 1950, is the fisherman's son who quietly becomes her lifelong constant. Netflix frames their relationship as an island friendship that grows into a whole-life partnership, not because things are easy, but because they keep choosing each other despite the odds. What really seals it is that he's been in love with her since he was 10. This isn't "he fell after she got hot," or "he realized it later." He simply never clocked out. He's written as quiet and unyielding, compared to cast iron to an old tree, the kind of man you cannot shake once he's decided where he stands. Gwan-sik's love language is action. He doesn't talk much, doesn't perform, and doesn't posture. He treats Isen's dreams as real, not as something to manage or shrink. He's gentle by default, but the moment she's treated unfairly, that gentleness turns into backbone. Even as a child, when Hae-sun is treated like an outsider and doesn't get fed properly, he notices and quietly brings fish from his own home for her. Later, when she's devastated by her mother's death, he stays beside her, brings her food, and comforts her in the only way he knows how. He doesn't need pretty words. He just doesn't leave. As they grow older, he becomes her teammate. He works beside her in the fields, harvests cabbages, sells them with her, and moves like someone building a life with her, not around her. When family pressure and living situations collapse, he's willing to leave everything behind and run away with her to start over. Is it messy? Yes. But the message is clear. He's not a man you have to beg to choose you. When they get scammed and robbed, he doesn't turn on her or look for someone to blame. He follows her lead, scared but steady, and tries to fix things together. And in one of the most insane romance moments I've seen, there's a reunion where he doesn't run to her. He literally jumps into the ocean and swims straight to her. What makes him Tier 1 isn't one big gesture. It's the pattern. Childhood, youth, marriage, family, his consistency never breaks. Even later, as a father, he becomes a home, telling his children to run back to him if they have problems. What makes Gwan-sik stand out is how grand his love feels. Even though the setup itself is anything but grand, this isn't modern Seoul. We're not watching cute school flirtations or aesthetic cafe dates. Their story is set against real life. Poverty, survival, time passing, and choices that actually cost something. And yet, through all of it, his love never wavers. That's why Gwan-sik isn't just a good man or a nice male lead, he's romantic as a habit. He lightens Aesun's burdens without trying to tame her spirit. And that's exactly why young Gwan-sik takes the top spot. Tier 1. This is my husband, Your Honor. And that wraps up the ranking. Do you agree? It's totally fine if you don't. But if you're disagreeing about young Gwan-sik, just know I will be respectfully arguing in the comments. Let me know. Which K-drama male leads you want me to rank next? Because I'm clearly having way too much fun with this. I'm thinking of Gong Ji-hyuk from Dynamite Kiss. Is he a solid 1 or a 5? And while you're here, click on this video to check out the upcoming Netflix releases this year. We might just get another young Gwan-sik level male lead.